and gentlemen, to talk to you, to talk to us about crafting brands for a life in a connected world. Please welcome Rahul Welde.
So firstly, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here today. And I think this is going to be an incredible thing that I'm going to remember forever, because not very often will you get on stage after the god of cricket, after a godman in God's own country. So this is really, really a unique privilege. And I think it's certainly I'm reeling from a lot of deep stuff which was there in the earlier session. I hope a cup of coffee and tea did everybody good, and we are back to the business of brands, right? And that's what this session is going to be all about. So what I'm going to do is over the next 30 minutes or so just canter through a completely different lens from what you've heard in the first two sessions, and really talk about the aspect of brands, the aspect of advertising and communication, and of course in a context in a world which is super connected and super fast, right? And I don't need to introduce Unilever to you. We are fortunate enough as a global company to be serving over 2 billion people every day with over 400 brands, many of which are absolutely iconic in their own right. And certainly many of them are household names, and hopefully all of you are using tons of our brands. And indeed, I encourage you, this is a great product, so please, this small sales plug on the behalf of the company is use lots and lots of Unilever products. There are two direct benefits. The first is the products are great, and the second for this group is that the more we sell, the more we advertise, right? So it straightway comes back to you, so please, yeah? Right, and many of these, like I said, are household names you guys are very familiar with. Now, I want to, before I get on to the aspect of crafting brands, I just want to touch upon very, very briefly on what's happening. And as you know, there are extraordinary changes which are taking place in the world. And that's not something that is new, but I think what is new is the pace of the change, and surely the speed and the velocity with which changes are taking place. And all of it can be summed up by saying that it's happening because of only two things, which is digital and technology. So if you look at the last 5 years, 10 years, that is the absolute sort of thing which has impacted our lives. And one of the biggest impacts is that the world has got super connected. Now, this is nothing new. I'm not going to reel off statistics, but the truth is that the entire world is now super connected, and whether you call it the world has gone flat, or whether you say that, look, there are in 1995, just 20 years back, there were close to 20,000 odd websites, and today there are 634 million. There are 634 million websites today, right? And interestingly, it is said, and it is predicted that in 20 years from now, close to about 20 years from now, there will be about close to 40-50 billion connected devices. 40-50 billion connected devices on a planet which is about 7 billion people. In other words, just about everybody in this room will have 5, 6, 7 connected devices in their home, in their pocket, or wherever. And it's not difficult to imagine. You heard a number of speakers yesterday talk about this whole entire aspect of digital technology and connection, right? Right, and from a marketing perspective, what this has given result to is an extraordinarily complicated ecosystem. The days when we could just shoot out a TV commercial, put it on a DVD, send it across to a TV station and have it aired, those days are pretty much over. So while there are a couple of companies, or 2, 3, 4, 5 global companies which have bragging rights in the digital world, the reality is that as a marketer, as an advertiser, as somebody who's in that ecosystem is actually dealing with lots of these players. Don't try to read those, not meant to be read, really speaking, because there are just too many of them. And this is true of whether it's social media, it's true of data, it's true of mobile, it's true of analytics, and whichever way you look at it, if you're in the agency world, you're in the media world, you're in the advertising world, then you are suddenly dealing with 20 people, 20 different types of players. Quite frankly, you have no idea that they even existed. So for many of us, in fact for all of us, I think it's like being in a maze and not knowing whether we actually headed towards some destination, or is it a dead end, should we be going left or right, and all of that. So I want to set that context absolutely at the beginning, that there is, in my judgment, nobody in the world who can claim to have mastered this connected world and really be super marketer in this digital world. So I think we're all on a journey where we are taking baby steps, right? So with that, so how do you actually deal with this? And I just thought about, okay, so how do I bring this together? And I think there's a very simple thing. We're in a beautiful place, wonderful venue, and all you got to do is keep calm and try and simplify. And that's what really I've tried to do, and which I'll talk about. And I'm going to talk in bunches of threes so that it's easy to remember and hopefully some of it sticks, yeah? Crafting brands for life is Unilever's approach towards marketing. It absolutely sort of defines the way we approach marketing. And we look at it in the context of three things. The first is about putting people first. Now, I'm sure that everybody has heard stuff like this before, but I want to share that this is not about consumer centricity. It is, of course, about consumers, but it's a little higher level than that. It is about looking at people, especially in today's context, as individuals, as human beings, and then possibly looking at them as customers or consumers. And there's a dramatic difference. And for those of us, in the media world, if you're running a TV station, you think of viewers. If you're in the print world, you think of readers. If you're an advertising agency, you think of clients. But above, and indeed, if you're a marketer or advertiser like us, we think of consumers. But the reality is that if you're in the business of marketing, then you've got to think of people first, who, by the way, could happen to be your consumers or not, right? That's a dramatic difference. I think the second thing which we've tried to embrace is to think of building brand love. And especially if you think of marketing, what's been talked about for a long period of time is that you want to build marketing brand preference, you want to win share, you want to grow your sales. But we think that all of that is secondary to building brand love. So building brand love for us is a higher order purpose. We want you to absolutely fall in love with our brands. And if we achieve that, we believe market share gains, sales growth, profit growth, all the rest of the business metrics will follow. Very, very important difference. And in order to do this, which is to build brand love, what we have to do within the media, advertising, communication space is try and unlock the magic in some ways for you so that you can actually begin to experience our brands in a very, very different way. Right. So there will be three things that I will go through over the next 20 minutes or so. The first of what I want to talk about is content. And I picked this because this is absolutely, in my view, at the center stage and the first piece, which is really important. Often defined as creativity, often talked about in the context of saying that the idea is bigger than anything else and the rest follows. And I think that's absolutely true because the center of marketing and marketing communication is content. What is it that you have to say to people is really, really important, and then follows how you say it and what happens around it. So I think that's the first point. And if you really look at it, and I talked about the rapid changes, but basically content is just exploding around us. It is exploding at a pace which we cannot even begin to imagine. I mean, just as an example, I believe the latest stats are that 400 hours of videos are uploaded on YouTube every single minute. Every minute. Not every day, but every minute. You've got, Facebook, which claims now 4 billion views of different pieces of content are taking place on Facebook platform a day. Right? So these are just absolutely staggering numbers. And what this has meant is that the content explosion in the digital world, and you heard earlier that our brain is like a supercomputer and it's bigger, and it's absolutely true. And now imagine that supercomputer now has access to all this content which is out there. It's been doubling pretty much every 2 years since the last 5-6 years or so. And I believe it has touched something like 8 zettabytes. And obviously, I certainly didn't know what a zettabyte is, and I'm sure that many of you don't. And I tried to look it up, and apparently it is every single word that has been spoken in the history of mankind is 8 zettabytes. I mean, that's kind of insane, right? Whether words or whatever. So there's enormous amount of content which is there. And then, therefore, that puts a huge degree of pressure, challenge, and an opportunity on us as marketers to play in this space. If this is what is happening around us, we absolutely have to be at the center of the content thing. And therefore, if you're a brand, if you're an agency, or working for a brand, I say we need to think of brands as publishers, not as brands alone. We got to think of brands as content creators, as curators, as people who actually have a big play in the content space, and not just something which where we make an ad, whether it's a television commercial or a print ad and rest. So it's a very dramatically different approach, and it suffices to say that as Unilever, we are at the beginning of this journey. But it's a journey where we've taken, I would argue, a little more than baby steps, and I'm just going to talk to you about a few cases of how this comes to life. The first is that in India, we've got a great company called Hindustan Unilever, I'm sure you're all familiar with. We've just launching and have launched what we call as the HUL Content Company. So this is a completely different approach from what we were doing. We will continue to advertise because that's important, but we will invest a significant amount of time, energy, resource, investment in this whole space of content. We just did a roadshow in our Mumbai office in June, where many of the biggest players, whether it's from the studios, whether it's from the TV companies, the digital players, all of them participated. And what we want to do is begin to curate and create content which reaches our consumers. And we get this sort of confidence to approach this from some great examples we've had. And we have a fantastic brand globally called Paddle Pop Max. It's an ice cream brand which kids absolutely love. And we started playing around in this space about 3 or 4 years back in Turkey in a big way. 3 years back, we were always doing episodes and serials and advertiser-funded programs. You've heard of all that. And we got around to saying, how about if we launch a commercial movie ourselves? Right? It's a paradigm shift in the way we would be thinking. A commercial movie, which means you launch it in many theaters and you actually begin to make or lose money. 3 years back, we mounted it in 175 cinema halls in Turkey. It was a blockbuster. We got, obviously, it reinforced some of the belief that we had, and we launched it in a couple of hundred movie halls last year. It made money. Interestingly, the franchise of Paddle Pop is now big enough for us to actually be able to sell it in the market. And Paddle Pop, in a conventional sense, if you look at advertising from within the context of Turkey, makes money rather than having to spend on advertising, because the properties which are built around not only feed the brand, but actually are of commercial benefit to the brand. So I think it's a dramatic story of how brands can begin to play. And like I said, this is only one example, and indeed, hopefully we will see many more of these kind. And the reality is that content in today's world is not only audiovisual as we knew it, which is a television commercial or an episodic series and all of that stuff. This is about owning channels and properties. This is a channel called All Things Hair. I spoke about putting people first earlier, and what this does is really only looks at people from the context of hair. And what women want to know is whether, how they do styling, or whether there are tips related to how they manage their hair and so on. And by the way, it has, some brands and, related stuff from Unilever. But the reality is that we're mounting a channel, launching a channel which is for women. It is now in a number of countries with close to a couple of 100,000 women who are subscribing to this channel. Right? And we will grow this community of consumers or people, and who, by the way, will great experiences related to hair and styling tips or whatever they need. And in the process of that journey, we'll get touched upon some of our leading brands in the hair care space. And much the same way, like we do Lakme Fashion Week in India, we're now exploring a number of properties and launching them. This is called the Fashion Runway in Indonesia. But the big difference is it's not a big event like it happened in Lakme Fashion Week. This practically happens virtually and on the web. So women get to experience it, or people who are interested in fashion get to experience it on the web rather than in real life. This is again an example of something we did in Dubai, which is to live stream the entire event rather than to have it online. So the basic point I want to make is that in today's world, you're allowed to create content which is practically on this stage, and as you heard earlier, it could well be a green room, but broadcast it across the world on the web instantaneously as if it is happening in real life. And I think Sachin talked about the fact that he could be here, but we could pretend that he is in Egypt. Again, these are some examples of what I call as audiovisual, but the reality is that there's a hell of a lot of text content also which is getting created and put on the web. So this is again a site with the spirit of putting people first, which addresses things to do with cleaning. And as you know, we've got great brands like Domestos, Surf Excel, Rain, and a whole lot of others which play in the space of cleaning. And what we want to do is make consumers' lives easier by giving them access to stuff to do with cleaning. Yet again, we will see that the brands actually come after what we're trying to communicate. So what we're communicating is about, their real lives, and by the way, we may talk about our brands. Again, in the same space, we have some great brands in the foods. And therefore, we thought that like Clinipedia, we should have a portal and a gateway called Recipedia, because the truth is that in many countries, and I'm sure including India, it's of great deal of interest to people is recipes. You heard earlier, I think yesterday it was about food being one of the largest sought out items in today's world, and no surprises. Therefore, it's really important that we begin to understand and unlock recipes if we want to make sure that our brands are used more and more. A great example of how this was done was a project called ReciTweet, and basically the big idea here, and I'll show you audiovisual shortly, but the big idea here was that if you are able to just pinpoint to 2 or 3 items in your refrigerator, it would be super cool if instantly you could get access to a recipe related to those 2-3 items. 2-3 years back, we launched a great project in Brazil, which was about if you had in your shopping cart 2-3 items, so let's say tomatoes, bread, Hellmann's, and ham. If you had these 4, then at the print, as you even check out of the cash counter, you will get a recipe which has these 4 ingredients and perhaps a few more. right? Instant use of data and technology to be able to serve to you what exactly is relevant and interesting for you from the perspective of utility. Let's take a look at a video which brings it to life.
Your fridge is amazing. If there are even just 9 ingredients in your fridge, you are already able to prepare over 360,000 recipes. That's like having a completely different dish every day, lunch and dinner, for 500 years. So why do you still insist on making that plain old sandwich? So when there's a lack of inspiration, or you just don't know any other recipe, there's Hellmann's Recitweet. Now you are able to prepare thousands of different recipes with just one hashtag. Tweet any ingredient that you might have in your fridge. Plus the hashtag Prepara pra mim, which means prepare for me. And the Hellmann's profile automatically sends you back a delicious recipe. Recitweet accesses the biggest recipe database, Recipedia, generating a custom recipe according to what you have available, without having to download an app, or search in a recipe website, or even call your grandma. Recitweet is the first hashtag that gives you an automatic recipe. Through this new use of Twitter, millions of people have gone beyond the sandwich. In just one day, more than 22 million impressions were generated, with an engagement rate 3 times the national average for Twitter, and with more than 82,000 interactions, thousands and thousands of recipes were delivered. So the next time you open your fridge, you might even go for a sandwich, but it won't be for lack of a better option. Hellmann's Recitweet. Thousands of recipes just a tweet away.
So this is really, really early stage. It's in Brazil right now. It's been launched in Brazil and Latin America. And our ambition is very clearly to make sure that we create the biggest house, the biggest encyclopedia, the biggest bank, whatever name you want to use it, of recipes, and enable instant access. So just as an example, many parts of the developing and emerging markets do not have access to smartphones. We know that smartphones are growing, but the penetration is not nearly as close as the US or the West. And therefore, we've now piloted a project in South Africa which does exactly the same thing but does over an SMS. So you send an SMS which says whatever is in your refrigerator or what you want, couple of ingredients, and automatically the system recognizes what those ingredients are, pulls out a set of recipes from the bank and sends it back to you. So the big point I want to make is that when we look at content, it is about sort of making sure that it's firstly multi-platform. I gave you some examples, so it's not just television or not just the web or not just the print, but you could be playing across a number of areas, and indeed as big brands or great brands, you need to play across a number of areas. It should absolutely be multi-format, and by multi-format I mean audio, visual, web, text, whatever is there at your disposal, got to leverage all of that, and most importantly, have an ambition and a play which delivers content at scale, because in the end of the day, certainly for a mass consumer goods company, it's absolutely important that scale is kept center stage. The second piece I want to talk about is about connection. So the first is about content, and if you just sort of let it stick in your head, it's content, it's fairly simple. I would say that if you're in the advertising business, get out of it. You should not be in the advertising business. You should be in the content business, which, by the way, advertising will be a part of, right? If you're in the media business, don't be in the media business. Be in the brands business, because at the end of the day, these are the brands which keep the wheels running, and you are already in the content business. And if you're a brand, don't be in the brands business when it comes to communication. Get into the content business as if you were a content company. And we have, typically if you see a room like this, we have this triangle which already exists. It's just that it is not looking at content the way I've described. It is still looking at advertising, still looking at brands, still looking at media and those properties. Now naturally, if we were to produce this great stuff, whether it's Recitweets or some fantastic movie, and we don't get it distributed, we don't let it connect with people, that is no good, because we are not in the business of creating something which is just going to stay in boardrooms. And connections are really important. If you look at the world around us, and I think this applies to all countries, definitely applies to India and developing and emerging markets, you could broadly have the country or a set of society divided into the haves, the have-nots and the have-lots, right? So it looks familiar. You know, this is what sort of economists and intuitively it just makes sense. Now the reality, however, of today's world is that each of these sections have a mobile. So you have a have-lot who has mobile and who have-not who still has a mobile. As they say, you know, there are more mobile phones now in many parts of the world, including in India, than there are people in many places, right? They're more important than toothbrushes, they're more important than this and that. The reality is that this is the absolute oxygen and the device that on which all people on the planet are living or are going to live. And there will be soon 7 billion people, I don't know how many would be connected, and all of them would be connected with mobile. So this is really the most important piece for us. I'm sure many of you have heard of this case, but for those of you who haven't, this is, I think, the most iconic project that has happened perhaps in the history of communication, not just in the history of mobile advertising. A project called Kan Khajura Station, which was led by our team in India, which is now across 9 states, has a subscriber base of people who dial in and engage with the platform of close to 36, 37 million, spending tons of time. And from a pure advertising perspective, because that is where we get our return apart from the engagement, is about close to 500 million impressions. Staggering numbers. But the most important part of this is that this established a very, very unique connection which we otherwise could not have envisaged. We've now been on this journey for what? Close to 2.5 years. By the way, I'm also told, and I don't know if statistically it is true, that this is the most awarded campaign in the history of Indian advertising in terms of sheerly the number of awards that I've won. So, and we've got a fantastic team, who did it for us over here. So, big round of applause to the guys here. Yeah. However, I think that is just the beginning. And the reason I say this is the beginning is because this is only about, establishing that first connection. But the real ambition from a marketing standpoint has to be and must be to move from these connections to building real relationships with people and be able to engage with them almost on a one-to-one basis, and if not on, earlier we would talk about segments, but indeed it is possible now to talk to super sub-segments and connect with them on a one-on-one basis. We invested, through Unilever Ventures, which is our venture capital arm within Unilever, in a company called Brandtone, which is now across a number of countries in D&E markets, with exactly the same objective. How is it that we can connect and build relationships with millions of people? Could we actually make sure that we have connections with 1 billion people out of the 2 billion people that we serve? And when I say connections, I mean, in this case, really deep engagement. And it starts with a very simple process, which is establishing the connection first and beginning to get rich information. To start with, it's probably just a telephone number, and through sequential exchanges, collect layers of data which enable me to serve an ad or to have a dialogue with Raj Nayak, which is very distinct from the dialogue I have with Pradeep Gua. And that, I think, is an absolutely terrific impact that we can make on marketing, because we know that, while many people are similar, no two people are alike. And therefore, if we are able to deepen the relationship where we can have a direct dialogue with an individual in a mass market sense, a connection at scale, I think that would be terrific. We've got some great examples of many campaigns. We ran a campaign last year which has been very successful, of Sunlight in West Bengal. We've been running lots of these in Africa, and like I said, this is a Unilever Ventures company which is now on a path to making sure that we connect and deepen engagements with billions of people. We also think that, going back to what I said, that no two people are alike, and much like that, no two societies, no two countries are alike. Omo is our brand, popularly known as Surf Excel in India, but we call it Omo in many markets. As an example of Omo, South Africa is where we enable women whose biggest challenge, or one of their big challenges, was how to engage kids and teach them math. And if there was a way that we could create an easy way for these mothers to engage with their children and to actually be able to teach them math, that would be a big deal for them, right? And as a result of which, we launched what we called as the Omo Fast Kids Africa app, which basically what it does is it enables women to teach math to their kids in a fun and an interesting way. But of course, the challenges in China are very different, because they're super good at maths. I mean, they can only get better. They're still probably at 99. They, of course, want to score 100, but they're really good. But their mothers have a different challenge, which is, how do I get my child to go out and play? Because they're studying all the time, they're doing tuitions all the time, they're doing whatever it is which is indoors, and therefore, is there a way that I can get people, these kids, to go out? And therefore, the same version or the same mainframe, the same thinking, but applying it in a different context and looking at a property which we called as Omo Let's Play China. And that's a very different proposition from Fast Kids Africa, as you can see. So I want to leave you with three things related to connection. The first of which is just leverage mobile. The second of which is leverage mobile. And the third of which is leverage mobile. If in advertising and marketing, we just focus on this aspect, and it doesn't matter which part of the business you're in. It doesn't matter whether you're Unilever or you're any other company, whether it's in the content business, whether it's in advertising business, whether it's in autos, wherever you want to go, just leverage mobile. If we singularly focus on this aspect, I think we're going to make great progress, from a marketing standpoint. Now, it's all easy to talk about content, it's all easy to talk about this whole paradigm shift in the way we deepen relationships and engage with consumers and make these connections. But at the absolute sort of bedrock of this, underpinning both these aspects is culture. And I said earlier that I would talk in three. So the three things, if they can stick with you, are the content, the connection, and the culture. And I think this is by far the most defining piece, because everything else, can follow. If we make the culture work and we put things which are in place which are transformational as far as culture is concerned, the rest is easy to get, relatively easy. The first of which is about collaboration and leveraging partnerships. And certainly I think this applies in general. It's a buzzword which we use very often in the business, and it's absolutely the right buzzword to use. It's the right thing to follow, and we've been doing that. I think the big shift now is, however, that there is a possibility, and in fact more than a possibility, but the real power of partnerships is from scale with some of these global, really big companies. And therefore, one of the approaches we've taken is to leverage partnerships with the biggest players on the planet with two ideas. One is, of course, the biggest, but the second is they're super smart, and they're certainly at least 2 or 3 steps ahead of the game when it comes to people like us. And therefore, we have a lot to learn and a lot to gain from them. So this is the first part. And naturally, we need to continue to collaborate with our existing partners as well. I want to spend a couple of minutes sharing with you some perspective of how I see the world changing. The first of which, if you looked at Wall Street a few years back, Dalal Street, whatever you had people who went onto the trading floor and shouting and screaming and waving their arms and giving some signals, and that's how trades were being done, right? It happened, and certainly, when I was in college. That is how Dalal Street was, and similarly Wall Street. And within literally no period of time, that has changed. It's all happening. You can now do multi-million, multi-billion, whatever deals you want to do, practically at the click of a button. Sitting in Singapore, you can do a trade in New York, and so on. So the entire process of automation has totally changed the way Wall Street operates. So why am I saying this? And the reason I'm saying this is because something that you heard yesterday. This is exactly what is happening to the advertising industry. It's begun to happen, right? We had the days of the madmen where, we had to meet each other and we had to strike deals and we had to come out with creative ideas and creative briefs, and all of that is getting super disrupted, supercharged by computers. What you heard yesterday as programmatic, basically the idea of tons of computers doing the work of millions of people. And I think this has a very, very big impact on the way we operate. The way we've tried to approach it is we've set up what we call as a Unilever Media Command Centers across a number of places. This is a picture of our center in Singapore, which basically in a small room tries to do what typically, we would have an army of people doing. Being able to develop, deploy, measure, optimize, develop again, and so on, all within a fast period of time in a practical small facility. And very much we're loading these command centers. Now they're already there in 6 places. And very much these will become the center of how we operate and deploy media. Now, this is certainly not going to happen when it comes to television soon, but this is the way of the future as more and more money shift digital, programmatic, automated, command center approach would take over. We look at it slightly differently. So this is, while a physical place, it is think of it like SWAT teams go in during a campaign, run the campaign, go out. Another SWAT team comes in, operates pretty much what they need to operate, and go out again. We also began to experiment in a very big way, because bulk of our budgets actually, if you remember, and many of you will relate to this, go behind what we call as really traditional ways and conventional approaches. But more and more we are carving funds out of our budgets to purely experiment, which is, you could argue, almost like blue sky thinking. Nobody wants to fund that idea. You pitch it, it makes sense, it doesn't have the budgets, and it goes on the floor. Right? Stuff that we would not do earlier. We did a global initiative we launched last year called Go Global at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where we contacted or pitched our briefs to close to 400 odd startups. And by the way, I mean, all of these are, companies which are sort of super small. Either they've just gone through an A round, or in some cases, just angel investing in the seed round. So these are not really big funded companies, but clever guys with great ideas who we thought would be able to address some of the challenges we had. And what we got in the end was, 14 odd finalists who presented at Barcelona. Remember, I'm talking about companies which are $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, maybe $1 million kind of startups, really super small. And they pitched and they won our business. And naturally, if they won a project with us, there is a direct benefit to them. The first benefit is they can put it on, their profile or the CV, and one or two of them, if they get lucky and the ideas fire, they get scaled up globally at the pace of lightning. And many of them, at least 2 of them, are now in over 30 countries along with us. So from nothing to everything within a short period of time from their perspective, an immense opportunity and learning from our perspective, because these are people who, quite frankly, we don't even know how to reach. And we naturally worked with somebody to make sure that we were able to tap into these 30,000 startups across the globe. Now, what we did was, then this was really successful, and we thought this can be a game changer for us in marketing, and it should be a game changer. So this will impact, we can actually impact culture. So we launched last year what we call as a Unilever Foundry. Some of you may have read, it's been covered pretty widely in the press in London last year. And basically, it's a platform for collaboration. It's a platform to make sure that we are partnering with startups and the startup community, and especially in the tech, digital, and media space, so that we can continue to pioneer and create new stuff which is communication related. We've now, up until recently, we've got about over 3,000 applications from a variety of startups. 22 of our brands have participated with them, and we've got 65 live projects which have gone to market. Many of them are small, and like I said, 2 of them certainly we've been able to take to 30 plus countries. But the big impact that is making is in the culture of the company, where brand managers, marketing managers, finance managers, supply chain managers, everybody is looking at this game very, very differently. We continue to advertise, by the way, so it's not like we're not going to advertise in the conventional sense, but a large part, like I said at the beginning, of our energy, effort, money, resource is going behind this kind of thinking. That brings me to the last theme of this whole space of culture and what I believe in. And I think it's about extraordinary agility. Agility like we've not known before, right? So for everybody who's in the advertising industry, we've got to completely shed our skin and make sure that we operate differently, practically within every day, right? And we don't do that. Really speaking, it's very difficult to do. But if there's one thing that I want you to think about and reflect on, and you heard about a lot of stuff earlier, but in my judgment, the speed is absolutely the new currency. There are a lot of things, creativity, ideas, and all of them will be important, but speed is the new currency. And I don't know if you remember this example. This was when Michael Vaughan, a few years back, tweeted that Lakshman had put Vaseline on his bat, and to avoid, being detected by the DRS when in the England series, right? And the next day you had this Vaseline ad which came up, which said that, we don't do it that way. We don't need to put Vaseline. So, somebody saw it on TV, it took about a day or 2 to convert it. It went on leading newspapers in India, 2 days later. Of course, everybody loves cricket, everybody loved the idea, and it changed. Much the same way, last year, soccer. You would have seen that for the first time, an innovation which nobody knew was introduced in soccer, which was the vanishing spray to mark the defense wall lines. So referees would go around with the funny spray, put it on the floor, and then it would vanish, the white spray. Remember that? Yeah? Instantly. And when I say instantly, meaning literally within a few hours, somebody was watching. So it wasn't unlike, it was not planned, because nobody knew that this is going to happen. Certainly, we had no idea, and I suspect really, really very few people knew that this was on. But instantly, we have a great product called Rexona deodorants, also called Sure in the UK and in many other countries. And what they did instantly was to get this ad out on Facebook, on Twitter, a whole lot of digital platforms. Basically, the proposition of the Sure can was that it doesn't leave marks. And one of the problems which people have with deos, which they often talk about, it leaves marks either on body or the clothes. And this proposition was around that. Instantly. And naturally, as you would imagine, and this is a product which is a market leader. It sells in many countries in Latin America, lots of countries in Western Europe. Something like this flies instantly. And I use the word fast and instant simply because social media and digital distribution allows things to move at the speed of lightning. Very different from approving copy, sending copy across, getting it printed, and then getting it out. Sure, that will continue to work, and that's important, but things can be much, much faster. And again, a great example, and all of this requires us to listen, to watch what's happening in the space and be able to act, right? Because you can either not listen, which is really bad, or you can listen, but not do anything, which I think, quite frankly, as a marketer is absolutely terrible. This is an example in India last year when one gentleman ordered a Samsung phone on one of the leading e-commerce sites, and somewhere along the line there was pilferage or whatever, and instead got a Vim bar instead of a Samsung phone, right? Real life story. And this is like, he naturally, all he did was he said, I ordered a Samsung phone, and what I got instead was a bar of soap. And what's going on in this world? We've got these listening posts, crack teams, whatever you want to call them within the company, who are looking at all this kind of stuff which is going on. And naturally, what a fantastic opportunity for Vim. So having heard it, all that I had to do was send him a genuine Samsung phone with a small little letter. We have nothing to do with it, by the way. We were not supposed to deliver the phone, right? But you're listening to something that's happening and you're able to act, and you say, here's whatever, Mr. Krishnamurthy, here's a phone from Unilever and Vim, and we understand that you had a big problem, so why don't you just enjoy the phone? And by the way, of course, Vim is a great brand. As you would imagine, what Krishnamurthy does is immediately he posts it on his Facebook or Twitter, and I can imagine it must be a person who doesn't have a big following and a large number of followers on Twitter or whatever. But you pick this up, and overnight, within 2 days, within 3 days, the world wants to talk about it, and you literally get, for the price of a phone, a month's advertising on a large TV channel or a digital channel or a print media or whatever. The point I want to make is this. So the question is very simple. The first question is, are you listening? Right? You've got all the tools at your disposal. Are you listening? And we've been talking about this over drinks, right? Are you really going into the consumers' minds and people's hearts and listening to what's going on? And the second big question is, if you're listening and you see something like this, what are you doing about it? Right? So if you don't have listening capabilities and systems within the company, the mindset to listen, that's bad enough. But even worse as a marketer is something happens and you do nothing about it because you're too busy with Excel sheets or whatever it is. So I urge all of you to just think about this concept of listen and act and be agile. I talked about automation earlier and super automation, right? Computer screens, media command centers and all of that. There's a terrific example from Brazil. And it's literally, fresh off so I don't even have a video to show you because it's really, really new. But basically what we thought is, how if we created a piece of content, and if you think of, so this is an audio visual, it's a trailer, whatever you want to call it. And typically it has casting, like it has people, it has a blonde, it has a brunette, it could have music, it could have rock music, pop music. There are many permutations and combinations which are possible. So imagine that this has 10, 15 permutations, combinations possible. We look at people in 4 sub-segments, and through automated distribution, be able to serve 100,000 pieces of advertising. 100,000. Not 1,000, not 100. So of course, there is one master audio-visual reel. But within that, depending on what the interest is, I know that he likes rock, so he gets a rock side. His wife is a blonde, so he gets, so being able to manage permutations and combinations, automated manner, and be able to deliver 100,000 pieces of advertising. I think it's absolutely mind-blowing, and it's going to change the face of advertising as we know it, because we could actually now have a piece of content which is short or, created once, but delivered in, multiple thousands of ways to different types of people, depending on what their interests are, and therefore connect with them on a one-to-one basis rather than general. I'm sure you've seen this famous video. I'm not going to show it. It's absolutely a brilliant example. It's the most watched video in digital, most watched branded video in digital. The most watched video, of course, remains, any guesses? Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style remains and continues to, by the way, attract millions of viewers even today. Yeah? But this was the most watched branded video of all time, Dove sketches. You already heard, at least I noted down 3 mentions of Dove from our speakers yesterday. Parry talked about it, and there was Dove which was spoken about again. And indeed, it's an iconic brand. No presentation on crafting brands for life can ever be complete without a reference to Dove. And there's a wonderful case which I want to talk about, which is, sorry, can we have the sound, please? Right, so this is about the Speak Beautiful campaign, and you got a teaser when Parry opened it up yesterday. I sort of felt like, the Amitabh Kant, Mulayam Singh Yadav, if you guys remember what he said, that, Mulayam Singh Yadav was saying point of order, that's my presentation, you're stealing. So I had that moment when he actually put this up, but I figured that, he wasn't going to give away the whole thing. So in a way it is good because you saw the trailer and you can see the real case now. But I think this is a great case because it rests in popular culture, and we know that Dove is a brand which authentically communicates with women, and it's all about beauty in a very different context. More importantly, Oscars and TV shows and all of that is really big in the US, as indeed it is in the rest of the world, but very, very important in the US. It combines technology, the power of partnership, our ability to co-create and create programs along with partners, in this case Twitter, and actually bring them to consumers' life. Let's take a look at the video which actually shows.
In 2015, Dove partnered with Twitter to change the way that women talk about beauty on social media. Dove and Twitter analyzed user behavior, language, and data. Together, they uncovered insights about how women discuss beauty online with the goal of inspiring real, positive change. Dove launched the Speak Beautiful campaign to encourage women to change the way they talk about beauty online. They created a 30-second TV spot featuring actual tweets from real women during ABC's Oscars red carpet. This cultural moment was an ideal platform to ensure the campaign received maximum exposure. But it didn't end there. Twitter developed a first-of-its-kind custom algorithm to identify negative beauty conversations women were having online. Dove engaged with women in real time, delivering personalized, positive messages of encouragement.
Thank you for joining us to Speak Beautiful, and keep it up.
Dove then created the first ever branded reverb and real-time data visualizations, tracking Speak Beautiful mentions and sentiment. With the support of influential voices such as Ariana Huffington and Amy Poehler, Speak Beautiful reached trending status. Both real women and the media have embraced the campaign, with top-tier media outlets celebrating the program.
Tweet your messages of inspiration using the hashtag #SpeakBeautiful.
Twitter saw a 30% drop in negative tweets and a 69% increase in positive tweets. Beyond Oscar night, Speak Beautiful continues to strike a chord with women everywhere, accounting for more than 111,000 mentions on Twitter, 93,000 unique users, and nearly 800 million social impressions. By encouraging women to reconsider the words they use, Dove has shifted the conversation and inspired individuals to speak beautiful, one tweet at a time.
I think it's a terrific case. We would have been really happy even with a marginal reduction in the negative sentiment, because the brand is all about making sure that women feel beautiful about the way they are. Right, so just to summarize, as far as the culture is concerned, there are three things which are really, really critical, which you can think about. The first is about collaboration. We've heard about it. It's nothing new, but it's absolutely important, and it becomes even more important as the spaces widen and the players are different. The second is about the spirit of experimentation, and are you and we willing to put our money where our mouth is? What percentage of your resource, budget, etc. are you able to keep towards doing this kind of blue sky thinking or new ideas? And the last is about agility and making sure that speed becomes a new currency in the way you operate. Right, so just to summarize, really, there are three pieces. Like I said, I just wanted to share things which hopefully, in a manner of speaking, stick with you. There is absolutely no way that you can justice to the whole aspect of crafting brands for life in a session of 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so. Absolutely no way that you could do it after a blistering session from Sachin Tendulkar, followed by a very deep and really sort of, you kind of feel like you want to breathe deeply session from Sadhguruji. And I tried my best to do, and hopefully some of these things stick and can enable a great conversation between us during lunch or otherwise. And that, ladies and gentlemen, in short, is about crafting brands for life in a connected world from me. Thank you.